somewhere comfortable. Let your body settle into whatever is holding you right now. You don't need to follow closely tonight. You don't need to remember any of this. There is nothing here that requires your full attention. Nothing that needs to be grasped or filed away. Just let the words arrive. Let them move through you the way distant music moves through the walls of a quiet house. You hear it, and then it's gone, and that's perfectly fine. Tonight, we're going to spend a little time with something you do every single night of your life. Something ancient and patient and still not fully understood. We're going to sit quietly with sleep itself. Not the rushing toward it, not the anxiety of it. Just the soft, unhurried science of what happens when you let go. You may already be drifting a little. That's welcome here. That's exactly where we want to be. There is no destination, no moment at which you need to arrive. We're in no hurry tonight. Breathe. Let your shoulders drop. Let the day behind you grow a little more distant with each breath. We begin gently. There is something quietly remarkable in the fact that every night, without being asked, your brain decides to clean itself. Not metaphorically, not in some vague poetic sense. Literally. While you sleep, the brain runs a kind of slow, patient maintenance cycle that it simply cannot run while you are awake. And the reason for that is something researchers only began to understand relatively recently, which makes it all the more interesting to sit with. During the day, your brain is busy. Signals move through it constantly. Thoughts, decisions, small adjustments, memories forming and dissolving. All of that activity produces waste, metabolic byproducts that accumulate slowly in the tissue. One of these byproducts is a protein called amyloid. It builds up as a natural consequence of the brain working hard. And for a long time, scientists understood that this buildup was associated with certain conditions, with cognitive decline later in life. But they weren't entirely sure how it was supposed to be cleared. Then, around 2013, something was found. A system inside the brain that had been largely overlooked. A kind of slow, quiet drainage network that activates primarily, perhaps almost exclusively, during deep sleep. It was called the glymphatic system. You may have drifted a little. That's fine. Just the sound of the words. The glymphatic system works like this. While you sleep, and particularly during the deep, slow wave stages of sleep, the cells of your brain actually shrink slightly. They become a little smaller, and in the spaces between those cells, cerebrospinal fluid begins to move. It flows through the gaps, slowly, gently, carrying waste products with it, flushing the tissue, clearing the accumulated debris of a long day of thinking and feeling and moving through the world. By morning, something has been washed away. Not everything, and not immediately, but over the course of a night's sleep, this quiet process does its work, and the brain you wake with is, in some measurable sense, cleaner than the one that closed its eyes the night before. There is something deeply restful in that idea, the thought that sleep is not simply an absence, not just the brain going quiet, but a kind of slow, gentle restoration, a patient undoing of the day. Let that settle. What makes this even more interesting is what it suggests about why sleep is so conserved across animal life. Sleep is ancient, extraordinarily ancient. Fish sleep, insects sleep. Even simple organisms with very rudimentary nervous systems show something that looks, in its way, like sleep. And for a long time, that was puzzling, because sleep seems, on its surface, like a vulnerable state. An animal that is asleep cannot run from danger, cannot find food, cannot watch for threats. And yet evolution, across hundreds of millions of years, has preserved it, has kept it. Every lineage that developed a nervous system seems to have developed sleep alongside it. The glymphatic system offers one answer to that puzzle. If sleep is the time when the brain removes the waste products of its own activity, then a brain that does not sleep would simply accumulate that waste. It would become slowly, quietly less functional, less clear. The cost of staying awake indefinitely would not just be tiredness. It would be a kind of slow clouding, a dimming of the instrument. Sleep, in this light, is not rest from life. It is part of life, a necessary, unhurried part. Breathe. There is more to it, of course. Sleep does not just clean, it also consolidates. During the night, and again, particularly during certain stages, the brain does something remarkable with the events of the day. It revisits them, not in a deliberate way, not consciously, but somewhere in the quiet architecture of a sleeping mind, the experiences of the day are being processed, strengthened, filed. Some are kept. Some are allowed to fade. Memory researchers have spent decades studying this process, and what emerges from that work is a picture of sleep, not as passive, but as deeply active. When you learn something during the day, a new piece of information, a new skill, a new route through a city you don't know, the neural patterns associated with that learning are fragile at first, easily disrupted. But during sleep, those patterns are replayed, reinforced. The connections between neurons are gently deepened, and what was tentative becomes something more lasting. This is why a night of sleep after learning something new tends to produce better retention than the same amount of time spent awake. The sleeping brain is not simply resting on what was learned. It is working with it, slowly, quietly, without any effort on your part at all. We continue softly. The most vivid stage of all of this, the stage most associated with the strange, drifting narratives we call dreams, is REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, named for exactly what it describes. Behind closed lids, the eyes move, quickly, back and forth, as if watching something that isn't there. During REM sleep, the body is largely still. The major muscle groups are gently paralyzed, a state called atonia, which researchers believe exists to prevent the body from acting out the movements of a dream. And yet, the brain during REM is in some ways more active than during waking. Certain regions light up in ways they do not during quiet rest. The emotional centers of the brain are particularly busy. The areas associated with memory and imagination are engaged. It is said that REM sleep is when the brain processes emotional experiences, not just the facts of what happened, but the feeling of it, the weight of it. There is something softly hopeful in the idea that sleep helps the mind carry its emotional load a little more lightly, that the difficult things of a day might be, in some small way, digested during the night, made a little less sharp by morning. You may have drifted. That's fine. Sleep moves through stages in cycles, each lasting roughly 90 minutes. In the early part of the night, the deeper, slow-wave stages predominate. This is when the glymphatic system does much of its quiet work, when the most physically restorative processes tend to occur. As the night progresses, the balance shifts. The REM periods grow longer. The emotional processing deepens. The dreaming becomes richer. This is one of the reasons that the final hours of sleep, the hours often lost to an early alarm, are not simply the least important hours. In some ways, they are among the most. The long, slow REM periods of early morning are part of what makes a full night feel complete, what makes the world seem upon waking a little softer, a little more manageable than it did the night before. There is no rush. The internal clock that governs all of this, the system that knows when to make you sleepy and when to bring you gently toward waking, is called the circadian rhythm. It is ancient too, billions of years old in its basic form. Even single-celled organisms living on the surface of the early Earth developed internal timekeeping systems tied to the cycle of light and dark. And in humans, the circadian clock runs deep. It regulates not just sleep and waking, but body temperature, hormone release, digestion, the pace of cell repair. It is a slow, patient oscillation underlying almost everything the body does. The clock is set, each day, by light, particularly by the blue wavelengths of morning light, which signal to a small cluster of cells deep in the brain that day has begun. And as evening comes, as the light grows warmer and then fades, the clock responds. Melatonin begins to rise. Body temperature begins to drift downward. The world grows a little slower, a little quieter. And somewhere in that quietness, the invitation to sleep becomes gently irresistible. It happens every night. This patient, ancient, biological settling. You don't have to do anything. The system does it for you, has been doing it in one form or another for longer than the species has existed. Just the sound of the words. There is something worth sitting with in all of this. The idea that sleep is not a gap in your life, not a lost third of the day, but an integral part of what you are. Your brain cleans itself while you sleep. Your memories deepen. Your emotions are processed. Your body repairs. The experience of being a human being, thinking and feeling and remembering and hoping, depends quietly and absolutely on those hours of stillness. The day is something you move through. Sleep is something that moves through you. And tonight, as always, it is already beginning. Some slow internal clock has already started its patient work. The light has shifted. The temperature has changed. Somewhere in the quiet machinery of your nervous system, a door is already opening. And there is nothing you need to do but let yourself pass through it. Breathe. Let that settle. Sleep is not something you achieve. It is something you allow. And so we leave it there. The science behind the stillness. The quiet work of a resting mind. You don't sleep well